The Labour MP Ian Murray is a member of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, which has previously carried out inquiries into the UK's relations with Turkey, and joins us now. Good morning to you.
A very good morning.
Do you have any sympathy with the Turkish position? They say that the YPG are terrorists, and in fact they've been emboldened and trained and armed by the US.
Well, it's a hugely complicated situation, and indeed the Foreign Affairs Select Committee report you've referred to couldn't come to any strong conclusions, because Turkey's had for some time a policy of, or an international policy of, my enemy's enemy is my friend. The Euphrates Shield operation, which was to remove ISIS from the region, meant that Turkey and many of the Kurdish forces, including the US, were working together to do that. And now we have a situation whereby Turkey has decided it doesn't want a Kurdish forces on its border and to remove them. So it's a hugely complicated issue. But yes, the YPG has been funded and armed by the US in order to fight ISIS in the region. Well,
in calling for restraint, what more should the United States do? Because it seems that the US and the UK, for that matter, really have very little influence over Turkey.
Well, it's very difficult indeed. I mean, Turkey is seen as a very close ally to the United Kingdom, and indeed the relations with Turkey are key to making sure there's stability in that region, in the Middle East and indeed in Europe. But
the reality is Turkey's looking to Russia and Iran, and they are the ones supporting Turkey in this endeavour.
Well, Russia seems to have allowed this to happen in northern Syria, in Afrin, where the offensive is happening, and it seems that the UN Security Council again seems toothless in this because of the Russian influence and veto on the Security Council. I don't know what happened at the Security Council meeting yesterday, because it was behind closed doors, and that was run by France, who brought that to the Security Council. So it's a hugely complicated situation, but the key thing here is that the long established conflict between the PKK, which is the prescribed terrorist organisation in Turkey, and Turkish forces, and indeed Turkey sees that any association with PKK is a terrorist organisation, but the terrorist association with the YPG that they're trying to clear from northern Syria in this offensive has never been proven.
Well, from what we understand from that Security Council meeting, that there was a unanimous feeling that this call for restraint should be issued. But ultimately, that is a relative term, depending on which side of the border between Turkey and Syria you're sitting on.
Absolutely, and the complex nature of what's happening in the region at the moment is that forces are working together and countries are working very closely together against the threat of ISIS-Daesh in the region. That seems to have been successful up to a point, and now what's happening is Turkey's nervous about the fact that the Kurdish forces from the YPG are creating this enclave in northern Syria, so have decided to try and create this buffer zone. I mean, Turkey have taken in almost 3 million Syrian refugees as part of this process as well.
Potentially creating more with this action, though, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. There's 800,000 people in this area, and they are starting to leave to seek refuge elsewhere. So it's a hugely complicated process that needs to be gone through. But the bottom line is we need to try and find some kind of peaceful solution across Syria that allows this conflict that's been long running now for many years to be resolved.
But when it comes to Turkey, it's a NATO member. As you say, excuse me, Britain sees it as an ally. The US, to an extent, sees it as an ally, although it's been funding, as far as Ankara is concerned, its enemies. I go back to my question about the influence that anybody can bring to bear here on Turkey.
Well, it's very difficult. Again, if I refer to our Foreign Affairs Select Committee report from last year, it did say that Turkey as a state was at a crossroads. President Erdogan, after the attempted coup back in June 2016, has taken some pretty strong steps to change the constitution in his favour and almost turned Turkey into a dictatorship.
And again, NATO, the UN, you could argue the UK, the US have done nothing.
Well, it seems that the influence is not as strong as it should be, and I know that there was criticism of the UK government for turning a slight blind eye to what was happening in Turkey because of the need for the UK to have a strong relationship with Turkey in both trade and indeed the influence that Turkey has in the region. So there is a lot more to be done here, and often you feel that the UN Security Council is toothless to be able to make anything other than strong statements, and I'm not sure strong statements either feed people or bring peace.
And talking of turning a blind eye, you disappointed in your Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, in the fact that he hasn't spoken out about events in Iran where people have died as a result of a government clampdown on protests?
Well, I mean, again, the Iranian situation is very difficult, but I think we have to be making it clear that any kind of population or oppression of population is wrong. Protest should be something that's done in a democracy. It's healthy for democracy, and we need to be making sure that as much support is given as possible.
Why is Mr Corbyn so quiet on this, do you think?
Well, that's a question you would have to ask Mr Corbyn and the Shadow Foreign Secretary. I haven't asked him directly, no.
OK, thank you very much for speaking to us. That's the Labour MP Ian Murray. He's a member of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee.